Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 104 of Positive Regression, a motorsports analytics podcast. I'm Alan Cavanna, joined as always by David Smith. On this episode, it's all about the restarts, who's good, who's bad, and even who's improving so far this year. Plus, our huge Coke 600 preview, where we'll start by asking if this is the most important race of the year. Intriguing, yes, I know. But first, as always, David, well, it's still new, but we are starting out our episode with a historical deep dive. This week into the 1994 Coke 600, which just happened to be the first victory for a young driver named, David, I'll let you go.
That would be Jeff Gordon.
Jeff friggin' Gordon, who would turn into the legend himself, four-time champion, 90-plus wins, thorn in my side, and it all starts with this race, David. David, Jeff Gordon was on the pole that day in 1994 for the Coke 600, but he would only lead the first lap. He was passed right away by Geoff Bodine. Sure, Gordon hung around for sure that day, but it was my guy. It was my guy, David. Rusty Wallace, who dominated the night. This was in the middle of Rusty's, 18 wins in 2 years. And he dominated the 600 that night, led 187 of the 400 laps. Geoff Bodine led more than 100. But David, this came down to the end with a 77-lap green flag run late in the race. And I think it was 19 laps to go. Jeff, everyone's pitting for fuel because it's, a long fuel run. Everyone's taking 4 tires. Well, Jeff Gordon in the 24, this young kid in the 24 car takes 2 tires. And the rest, David, is history. Gordon came out with a lead, drove to victory, and little did we know what this was the beginning of for both he and Ray Evernham. And again, what makes this so significant is how surprising the call was back then, David, for 2 tires. Yes, this was Jeff Gordon's first win, Ray Evernham's, all that stuff. But the call for 2 tires was so kind of out there still in 1994 that even after the race, they interviewed Rusty and he said, quote, "We never dreamed he'd do that. We were racing the 7 car. They weren't even thinking about the 24 car." Ray Evernham, they got applauded for the guesswork, taking a guess on 2 tires. And he said, "It wasn't a guess. They didn't leave me any choice. We couldn't beat them one way, so we had to beat them another." And David, that was the beginning of my love-hate relationship with Jeff Gordon. Mostly hate. But mostly from a fandom perspective, it all started then. Jeff Gordon finishes first. Rusty Wallace finishes second. And man, we'd see that a few more times in my lifetime.
It is wild. I let you pick this segment. I did not realize that you were going to be picking at a harsh childhood memory. Either way, it is sort of weird that even now, crew chiefs are second guessed for 2 tire calls on racetracks with minimal tire wear. And we might actually be going into a race this weekend at Charlotte Motor Speedway where those principles will apply and the decision may be equally as shocking. I don't, you can say that Ray Evernham brought different strategic plays into the sport, certainly popularizing the 2 tire calls in some respects. But has it progressed in the minds of observers? I don't know. It isn't. For you and me, it's not. And our listeners are certainly nodding along, saying that they're not surprised when that kind of call succeeds. But it still seems to be kind of that way. Like, whoa, they took 2 and it worked. I can't believe it. And yeah, that their story together. It began before this in the Busch series, but essentially it jumped up a few notches with this particular win. And I do want to talk about Jeff Gordon because he is, in my mind, becoming something of an underrated character. Maybe folks like to hang a lot of his success with Ray Evernham as the reason for his success, or they point to what Jimmy Johnson was quickly able to do once he got a Hendrick ride. But there is a certainly selective, somewhat revisionist history regarding not only his rookie season, but this season, his sophomore campaign, 1994 in the Cup Series. He only won 2 races in those 2 years. It was this one and the Brickyard 400. Sorry to bring that back up for you. big wins on big stages,
Yes.
right? And that's the memory. But his production ratings in those years, though they were really good for 21 and 22-year-olds on average, they were pedestrian compared to other drivers in those years. His rookie season peer was a 1.5. His second season peer, in which he won those races, the car was stronger, the team was stronger, the driver largely the same guy, maybe a little bit worse, if anything, a 1.452 peer. He crashed out of 5 different races in 1994. He was really trying to press the issue. Ray Evernham talked about that in a few different interviews. And that was more than his 1993 total. In 93, he suffered 4 engine failures and 4 DNFs related to handling. So that was kind of a moment in time. We've talked about it before, these races in the past where you see these mechanical failures for big teams. They didn't even have their stuff sorted back then. But after 94, it was the 95 season, the strides of the team and the driver finally coalesced and resulted in a 4.371 peer on the heels of a 7-win season. That was actually the first of 4 straight years of a 4.0 peer or higher. Kind of a ho-hum first 2 years, a lot of highlights for certain, but pedestrian when compared to other drivers. Might remind you of the current driver of the 24 car, who ranked second in peer this year, William Byron, maybe at a lesser scale, smaller scale, but the growth trajectory is there. So I found that to be interesting when you selected this as your deep dive this week.
But it is interesting only because I would always often go back and point to those first 2 years for Jeff Gordon and remind people that he did not win in his rookie year, right? There was that stretch from, I think it was 99 to 2006 where rookies won every year. It was an expectation. If you were a rookie, you can win, you should win because of X, Y, and Z. And it was like, no, this should be hard for rookies. I think the weird stretch is them being able to win. And now we see it where it is once again tough. And so when we see drivers like William Byron coming in and not winning at first and getting all this judgment early on, it seems crazy to me because it shouldn't be that way. And I think the Gordon approach, or at least the Gordon trajectory, is far more common than that early 2000s. Again, I think it started with Tony Stewart. Where it almost became common for rookies to win. That was not normal to me. The Jeff Gordon approach was far more normal.
Yeah. It popularized the Tony Stewart, and then I'm gonna get the order wrong, but Casey Kane was there, Denny Hamlin, Carl Edwards burst
Jimmy
onto
Johnson,
the scene,
Ryan Newman, all of them. So they all won.
And they were getting top tier rides very, very early. Not that Jeff Gordon didn't, and not that William Byron didn't, but it's not the same for everyone. And you're hitting upon race teams. At least in Denny Hamlin's case, Joe Gibbs Racing was already a juggernaut. Tony Stewart joined JGR. They were very nearly a title contender, and he came in at the right moment. So timing certainly matters as well. Lest we forget, Jeff Gordon was the first champion for Hendrick Motorsports, so he's sort of the pioneer in that respect. I want to ask you this, because Ray Evernham gets just a lot of love, and it's almost to a point where he is pinpointed as the reason for so much of Jeff Gordon's early success, and to an extent that is true. But Gordon, I do think he has become somewhat underrated in hindsight, and I don't believe that is fair. So Gordon and Evernham together won 47 races. Without Ray Evernham, Jeff Gordon won 46 races and a 4th championship. Won races with 4 different crew chiefs: Brian Weitzel, Robbie Loomis, Steve Letarte, Alan Gustafson. Gustafson's still carving out his own legacy. The other 3, I would argue, not Hall of Fame caliber. But Gordon, even late in his career, his final 2 seasons, you know that he was in the championship 4 in his final full season. But in terms of surplus passing value, this was the heat seeker that Gordon was, even late into his career. 344 positions created beyond
Ooh.
statistical expectation. He does not get near enough credit for not only his own almost imitable brand of aggression, but the way in which he deployed aggressiveness efficiently, especially in traffic, was pretty remarkable. And looking back at some of these races, and I watched parts of this 94 race earlier today, it was all there. You could see him searching and plotting and making those passes. And by the time he was winning championships, it was clockwork. He was a surgeon. And not enough respect goes into Jeff Gordon, the driver. Certainly benefit from having a good crew chief and a good team, but boy, he was pretty fantastic. As much as it pains you to maybe admit.
Oh yeah. Well, look, I can give respect where it's due, and it's funny you say he's maybe becoming underrated. To me, the more time that goes by, the better Jeff Gordon gets in my head.
You think so?
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Only because 93 wins. Think about that. Just think about everything Jimmy Johnson did, how good he was, and he was one of the greatest. The 7 championships. Puttered out, at the end, it kind of went away, right? And it stopped at 84. It was just for so long. It was like, oh, he's passed Jeff in championships, going to blow by him in wins. 93 is a huge effing number, man. Kyle Busch, I mean, we've thought about that for a long time. He goes nearly winless last year. Put up 93 wins. Can you do that? Can you put up 93 victories? Come on. And so the longer it goes, the more and bigger that number seems to me, which just seems crazy to realize what we did. And then the documentaries come out, and you just start thinking back to how dominant he was, Jeff Gordon, in that late 90s stretch. And it's just, to me, the more time passes, the better Jeff Gordon gets.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. And I hope that that's the case. And certainly even just kind of gleaning some of these late career stats, and there will be a way to look at the peak of his career and understand statistically what else he was able to do besides produce results. But that appreciation, I think it should be there. And this race was the start of all of that. So a pretty good pick to start us off tonight.
All right. Yeah, it started our historical deep dive into the 1994 Coke 600. Let's get the episode started, David. Fast forwarding to 2021, David, something we always like to talk about on Positive Regression, something I think we've helped kind of bring a little more mainstream into the garage in terms of restarts and what to look at. David, I give full credit to you. I mean, in terms of who's a good restarter, what to look at, what constitutes a good restart, all that stuff. So we're going to do the 2021 edition, at least so far into the season. Let's start with that, David. So far this season, who is good? Who is a good restarter? And what are you measuring that by?
Oh, there's so many answers to that question. There are multiple ways to identify good restarters, and it goes beyond simply tallying the positions gained or looking up at the retention rankings on Motorsports Analytics, because there are multiple retention rankings. So let's turn to Brad Keselowski here. He is the driver with the biggest retention rate on choose rule restarts this season. And those restarts omit Daytona, Talladega, the Bristol dirt race, and the road courses. It's a 76.92% retention rate. That tops the series. But the net gain is even more impressive. He is at plus 32 for a net. The next best net gain belongs to Kyle Busch, and it is plus 5.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Probably not a shock that he's a much better producer in races containing a late restart than he is in races that end with long green flag runs. Keselowski has a peer over 3 in races with a late restart compared to just 1 for races without. And I mentioned those splits for a reason. I think these restarts are particularly telling towards results and how drivers work through different race-ending situations. But Kyle Larson, there is a dynamic here that sort of proves the importance of analysis when discussing statistics, because if I just hung the numbers on a website, a lot of folks would be confused by it. His split is similar to Keselowski. The split, similar to what Keselowski has, skews towards races without late restarts. He's nearly at a 5 peer for those races and holds a negative 0.296 peer in races containing late race restarts.
Well,
Now,
so the longer it goes green at the end, the better Kyle Larson is faring. Is that safe?
correct.
Okay.
Yes. Good assumption.
Well,
And that seems as if he isn't clutch or something, or that he's not a good restarter. But we can at least quantify whether he's a good restarter because he ranks 3rd in retention on choose rule restarts. He's fine. I mean, he's terrific. There isn't an inherent problem with his restarts, but when these races reset towards the end, it bunches up the field. It provides opportunity for others to overtake him for position while simultaneously eliminating what was pretty much a surefire opportunity at the win, or at least a good finish. And we've talked about this before. Who does it remind you of? It reminds you of Martin Truex, right? Peak Martin Truex, the last few years, one of the best restarters in the series. There was a stretch when his best results came whenever there was not a late caution to thwart what was the most likely ending, and in races that didn't have many restarts at all, just had a low caution volume.
well,
And
maybe this is too simple, but I think Larson and his speed this year, Truex when he was classically fast, back in a few years ago, the 78 car speed, if you will. But I guess if you have a restart, you're neutering their biggest strength, right? Is that a fair way to put it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if you're lights out speed and all of a sudden you have a restart, you've just cut right off the speed and the biggest strength you had.
Yeah, it's gone. I mean, all that advantage, that big lead that's probably seconds from the car behind you, it's gone. And that's the air that Larson is in right now. It's not that he's bad at restarts. It's just that his results come when there isn't anything there to wipe away what is the most likely outcome. And last driver I want to point to, a positive regression favorite, I'll say, Matt Benedetto, 7th overall in retention, 1st in retention from the preferred groove, and is the polar opposite of Larson. His peer in races with late restarts leads the series. His peer in races without a late restart ranks dead last. That is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of my favorite statistical oddities going right now.
That is odd. Let me ask you a bigger picture question in terms of, I'm trying to wrap my head around the right question here. What's better, I guess, positions gained or being good at retention, if you will? You know what I mean? Is keeping your spot a better metric to look at if you want to look in terms of success rather than people who can gain on a restart? Is it more important to just keep your spot sometimes?
Well, I think it's a 2-step process. The first thing that you want to do is retain the position because that mitigates the potential for a loss. If you're able to successfully do that, then if you have the proper mental wherewithal to understand what's happening, you can go for the gain. And that's what Kurt Busch spoke to when I talked to him about this very subject. It was, you have a plan before you go into turn 1. You know what you need to do. And when that thing succeeds, at that point, you can shift into trying to do something else. He equated that to an audible in football, just understanding what is happening around you and making a last minute adjustment. But it all starts with the first thing. And just if you were actually mapping out what a textbook restart is, the goal is to simply keep your running position. From there, that's where everything grows out. But if you do not keep that original running position, then you can forget about a gain because these next few laps are just going to be horrid.
All right, good. I wondered your thoughts on that. David, not only do you break down restarts, but you've gone the next step and broken down even beyond into the choose rule, right? Who's making the best decisions choose rule wise to put themselves in a better position, possibly to either retain or gain on a restart. So, who's made the best use of the choose rule, and how do you explain that?
Well, that's a good question. Ironically, if we were to look at the charts for best all-around choose rule restarters, it would go Keselowski, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. And if we were to look at the drivers who had the greatest percentage of preferred groove restarts, it goes Keselowski, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. Brad Keselowski is tops. He has had 62% of his restarts have originated from the statistically preferred groove. Ryan Blaney is at 57%. Kyle Larson is at 58%. And that has been key in their success. Pre-choose rule, maybe the 2018 season, I want to say, Kevin Harvick had a disproportionate amount of preferred groove restarts compared to the number that he had from the non-preferred groove. The reason for that is he was the leader a lot and chose correctly. Well, in this case, you have the opportunity to choose preferred or non-preferred wherever you are in the running order. And these three guys have not only just pragmatically selected the most likely spot where they can retain, they have had the most success with it. So it's been a driver in that success. There's one, Ricky Stenhouse, 59% of his restarts from choose rule tracks have taken place from the preferred groove. The problem is he hasn't restarted very well. He has a net loss of 7 positions. So the gain that you would expect from a preferred groove restart, it isn't there, not nearly as prolific as what we would expect, but the decision making is. So that's a start that he's identifying where he wants to start from. He just has to clean up what he's actually doing in regard to the execution.
Interesting. All right, we've talked about who's good. The most improved award after 14 races so far. Who is shining compared to their 2020 numbers?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a small sample size, but there are a few. Ryan Preece has moved from a 44% position defender to 53%. That's pretty significant in that he doesn't get many shakes inside the top 14. That's how I measure restarts. But now, the majority of the time, he's keeping his spot, and that's a big change. He has actually driven up his open market value, which an update will occur this week on motorsportsanalytics.com. He has gone from a 6-figure driver to a 7-figure driver, thanks to a litany of improvement, this being one of them.
My man, Connecticut kid.
Eric Almirola, from 57% retention to 75% retention. This has been, objectively, a bad season for Eric Almirola.
Yeah.
This, though, is the one bright spot. We have talked about Almirola in the past. Some of the things that he needed to clean up and this team needed to clean up was restarts. He has done that. He is the best restarter at Stewart-Haas Racing. When he gets a shot in the top 14, he's doing fairly well. It's the decision-making, the crashing, everything else that comes after that has sort of clouded what he has done well. But here it is, plain as day. He has improved. We'll see if that sustains, because that is a fairly high number. And
that was my first thought, though. I mean, as good as that sounds, it's almost like another twist of the knife, because it's probably the least he's been in the top 14 on a restart in 4 years. You know what I mean? Like in terms of the opportunities to excel and use this newfound skill, he's probably had fewer opportunities than before. It's just having a crappy year to be up there.
Yeah, and that's just kind of a tough kick in the chest right there.
Yep.
But when you have it, you have to make the most of it, right? And so we can at least credit him for doing that. And one last improved restarter I want to point out, Denny Hamlin has improved from a 65% retention rate to a 71. And he is netting out 4 spots from across all restarts. That is small as I say it, but to understand how frequently he has been near or at the front of the field, that small increase means a lot. It means the world. It means sustaining position. It means contending for good finishes. And we've noted that when you are in a situation where you are consummately contending for wins, it's the curse of the standard, as you call it, but any kind of small deviation from what you used to do very well actually makes a gigantic impact, because that's how hard it is at the front of a NASCAR Cup Series field. And Denny Hamlin's going the other way. He's become even better. So it will be curious to see how he carries this. But right now, this 11 team has done a lot well outside of, win. But this is one of the things that has helped keep them in contention at, maybe Coda wasn't one, but for 13 races, certainly events that it looked like Denny Hamlin had a shot at winning was based on his restart retention.
Yeah, and when you get to the top, it's hard to keep improving. So that is that is interesting to hear when you can hone those skills, because it will pay off eventually. We looked at the good, the improved. David, we have to look at the other side of the coin, of course. Bad's a strong word, but who's not doing so well in terms of, especially when it comes to impacting their results this year? I mean, who has been affected by poor restarts? Who are you looking at?
Yeah, so there are a few poor restarters in the series, but there's one, just considering he's in legitimate contention for a playoff spot. It is wild how poor Chris Buescher has been on restarts this season. He's been getting a lot of them. 33% retention all in, and a series worst loss of 37 spots from choose rule restarts and 77 positions lost across all restarts. And this does impact his peer splits. He's above a 1 peer in races without a late race restart, just over 0.400 in races with a late restart. And if you consider that point padding, getting into the playoffs without winning a race, it hinges on consistency. And Buescher is a driver who, until he wins, is attempting to do this. And it's clear that he isn't totally consistent. We'll see if it ends up biting him. But if you are going to take, and I think this is just the hardest possible path in the playoffs, but if you're going to take this path, there cannot be holes like this in your repertoire. So if it's a heavy slew of races down the stretch before the playoffs that have a lot of caution, setting up a lot of restarts or a lot of late race restarts, he might be in for a world of hurt. This might knock him off what's, at least right now, a really good trajectory.
And you brought up exactly what I was thinking, for listeners out there watching on Sunday, to think about the end of a race. If there is a restart, a little bell goes off in your head. Oh my God, watch Chris Buescher, because there's a 66% chance, apparently, if he's running, toward the front, that he's not going to retain his spot right now. So to see that play out, and then if he does, then you can consider yourself a little and be like, hey, Chris Buescher just did that. That's pretty cool. So it gives you something to focus on in these races. So that's what I like about what we hope we can educate you about on this podcast. David, there's others. You talked about the good, bad, the ugly, what have you. I just think of some of the exciting drivers, maybe not the ones that are always up front, but if they were to get a chance, guys like Tyler Reddick, how do you I like Tyler Reddick's jib, if you will, the cut of his jib on the track, running high, Mr. Excitement, going for it, kind of knocking on the door sometimes. How's he do when it comes to restarts?
Kind of tough sledding. He is right at 50%. So if you're a glass half full guy, then I guess okay. But the preferred groove retention is inarguably low, 63% with a net zero gain, which isn't the worst, but also you want to be able to pick up spots when you're restarting from the groove you want to restart from. The non-preferred groove, 38% retention, a net loss of 21 spots on 21 non-preferred groove attempts. And the choose rule, does it suit him? It's kind of unclear, because he's in this morass with a number of drivers. Austin Dillon is there, Ryan Newman, Ricky Stenhouse, Cole Custer. We've seen some of these drivers perform very well on restarts, but he is at 47% with a 20 position loss from restarts where he chose the spot. So for him, this is an area of potential improvement. And if you couple this with the really efficient passing that he's brought on now, seemingly like at every track, the pole at Coda was certainly an eye opener for me that he might have some chops that he hasn't fully displayed yet, but he's not contending for wins just yet, but he's contending for top tens at every conceivable track type. And this spot right here, if he cleans this up, those top tens are going to be becoming top fives. And from there, that's when you can start turning towards aiming for wins.
Nice. I'll give you one more, only because Christopher Bell, my jury's still kind of out on him in terms of, I know he can win, but if he's sitting there, say, in eighth toward the end of these races, is he trying to vault himself into the top five, or is he going, which direction is Christopher Bell going? Because I'm trying to figure him out still.
Okay, so he was one along with Chris Buescher, who I was going to talk about having poor restart numbers, but the saving grace here is he's already won a playoff race, so this isn't an issue yet. Like it's not going to keep him from the playoffs just yet. But if you were looking at his peer with in races with at least one late race restart, it is a 0.373. The split for races without is 0.793. And the retention, very, very close to Tyler Reddick, 52% retention all in, a little bit better than a coin flip. If you're going to be elite, you need to be about 25% better than a coin flip.
Wow.
To do that. And again, I mean, like Reddick, a sophomore driver, understanding how drivers react and attack and play defense on restarts take some time to understand. And this is, it's no shock that the three names at the top, Keselowski, Blaney, Larson, are experienced and have been running at the front of the field for a while. They have had a lot of experience doing that in cars of varying speeds. Larson was with Ganassi before he was with Hendrick, and Keselowski and Blaney have experienced some up and down speed with Penske. So they've kind of seen a little bit of everything and have used that knowledge to their advantage. Drivers like Reddick and Bell are still accruing that knowledge, and they need to understand how do they use it to their advantage so that they are able to execute on these short runs.
All right, good stuff. That was a deep dive into restart. So impress all your friends, everybody, when you're watching the race this weekend, and hope for more restarts. I know some drivers clearly do not want them, but the more opportunities we have to see this play out in front of us, I think that's cool. So good stuff, David, on the restarts. Let's move on. It is the Coca-Cola 600 this weekend, one of NASCAR's crown jewels. And David, 4 stages. Can't forget, this race has 4 stages because it's 400 laps, 600 miles, and more points on the line than any other race. So is this the most important race of the regular season? Maybe we can be choosy with our word there, but is it the most important race of the season? I mean, again, that word important. Factually, yes. I mean, the most valuable. I'll say valuable. It is obviously the most valuable race of the year. No way around that. The opportunity for points, that needs to be taken advantage of, especially if you're one of these bubble guys. I just think of like an Austin Dillon, a Tyler Reddick. I mean, every decision has to be made with these stage points in mind, because getting 2-3 stage points 4 times, I mean, stuff like that is going to add up at the end of the year if you don't have a win. So, if most valuable, most important, what say you, David?
Most vital.
Okay. Oh, really?
It could be that. It doesn't have to be that. So you're hitting on the right lines here. It is going to be selective based on the team of how they view the Coca-Cola 600. A top team that does well and accumulates points will have a higher single race point total than usual compared to other races. But that could be said for other top teams that have similar stage results and race results. Where this race could go really, really bad is if some of these teams without wins, let's say they blow an engine early or they just have bad races outright in which they don't score stage points at all and they simply get a mediocre result. That would represent a blow from a points perspective. This race offers more opportunity for points, but the impact, I think, will be the size of the separation between the teams that scored points and a team, if this happens, just completely failed altogether. So it might not be the most important race because there are a lot of ways that we can view that. But I would argue that of all the regular season races, this is the worst race to have your worst race. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and that's a fair way to look at it. The inverse of scoring points is, how many points you can lose or the potential that is no longer there. So I get what you're saying. I like that. In order to score those points, David, we may see strategic gambles. I think we saw that last year. I mean, Alex Bowman got some, used speed as well, but there were some good pick calls to get some stage wins and stage points. So in terms of strategic gambles, how does tire wear affect strategy and potentially impact these results? Because again, there are many decisions to be made with the 4 stages out there.
Yeah. Let's talk about that sequence with Bowman and Greg Ives. So Greg Ives took 2 tires only for Alex Bowman last year. It jumped Bowman from 13th to 1st. And because the tire wear was minimal, and this is important because I think we're going to see this weekend, it was 1 second of degradation in most cases. But Bowman got that lead, and credit to him, he arrow blocked his way to 2 stage victories. They finished 19th in the race, but we remember that call because they tallied the 4th most points. So forget the finish. They came away from the Coke 600 getting exactly what they wanted to get out of it. So the fact that there is another opportunity for stage points, another playoff point, that is huge. And it might be for the lead, it might not, but the machinations to make that can help pad points that carry you to the playoffs. And in that sense, this game, the stage point game, is going to dictate a lot of calls on Sunday. And because the tire wear is minimal, it's the same tire compound and combination for last year's race, clean air can turn a point grabber like Bowman was into a legitimate race win contender. That is entirely possible. The results of this race might not properly reflect performance because of this. It will be a straightforward race, but this element, the tire wear, is going to shape a lot of what we see on Sunday.
Interesting. And it's just, being in different positions, this year with Bowman already having a win or 2 wins. And I talked to Greg Ives in Austin, last week at Circuit of the Americas, and just saying how their strategy right now, their strategy is stage wins. His strategy will be to focus around those. And that's really the point going forward, right? So maybe that was different from last year in terms of going for 2 tires or making the call to get, it's just different situations breed different potential strategies. So it just makes you wonder what the 48 team or any other team in their particular situation will be doing this weekend and how it changes. I found that interesting, David. Well, looking back on former 600 races, it's been, if you have the speed, we've seen domination lately, right, David? Martin Truex Jr. A few years ago, a snoozer, right? I mean, what did he lead, like 490 something miles or something like that? Kyle Busch has done it before. They've had the speed. Speed has won out. So let's look at this year. 550 tracks. We've talked about him for weeks now. Kyle Larson has the fastest 550 horsepower car. We saw him dominate Atlanta. Didn't win. But is his speed enough to just carry it on and get the checkered flag?
It should be. I mean, he should win 2 stages in this one. Easy, not a problem. He's going to be the heavy betting favorite. And he's got a legit shot to win. Doesn't matter where he qualifies. But the notion of a race where tire wear is small, minimal, that is going to rein him in a bit. At the very least, it will keep him honest because there are going to be stage breaks in which these 2 tire gambles, if we can call them that, take place. There might be more cautions that give crew chiefs opportunities to do this. And in that sense, it's going to be difficult to pass. And clean air is going to matter a lot. We've seen this at every 550 mile and a half race. So it's not, it might be a case where he dominates. That might entirely be what we see Sunday night, but it's not over if he's seconds ahead, because this kind of move can completely flip the script. And I'll throw this in for folks to think about. It might matter. It might not. Kyle Larson has never won a 500-mile race. Should we expect him to win a 600-mile race? Does that actually matter? I don't know. But the trend becomes more interesting if it continues. So factor that in. Factor in the tires are the great equalizer. And yeah, it might be a dominant performance. That does not mean that he is leaving Charlotte with a race win.
Philosophical question, I guess, that has maybe doesn't have an answer, so I apologize in advance. But a team with a bunch of speed, who has more to lose? A team who has a bunch of speed and says, let's just keep the speed, take 4 tires every time, versus the car that's not going to beat the fast one, so let's take 2. Or does that team with all the speed say, we're so fast, let's just take 2 because we can afford to, because we're so damn fast any other way? You see what I'm getting at? Like, what is the better call, or who's under more pressure to lose if you are a slower team going for a strategy call, or the team with all the speed trying to keep that advantage?
The popular answer, if you ask crew chiefs this, what would they do? If they had this kind of lights out speed, they would do everything in their power to not screw it up. So it would be a heavy dose of 4 tire calls. And look, a lot of times that speed is going to win. That is the most correlative metric in NASCAR, and it's going to lead to stage points. If you get the car right, that's going to mask a lot of the deficiencies you have and make everything okay. So from the lead, there isn't a point to gamble. Now, here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to give up the lead late in the race like we saw last season. We saw not only Alan Gustafson, but James Small as well, gave up the lead to pit 4 tires in a race where tires didn't really matter all that much. I don't want to do that, especially this weekend. But if you're able to have that speed and maintain the lead, then by all means, keep it and don't do anything to upset the apple cart.
All right. Well, with all that said, David, let's make our picks to win the Coca-Cola 600. We've talked a lot of Kyle Larson, so I'm wondering, who are you going to pick? Who is your pick to win?
Oh, Chase Elliott, of course.
I'm taking a similar strategy. I'll let you go first, though. Tell us why Chase Elliott.
He is the top surplus passer on 550 horsepower tracks. As I just noted, it's going to be tough to pass just with the package, the dynamics of a 1.5 mile track, the air, the ease of aero blocking. He's able to work through a lot of that. His average best lap rank is in the top 5 as well. So he'll have a fast enough car with clean air. He'll be tough to beat, but I'm actually betting that this will be a tire wear race, and Alan Gustafson, for as much grief as I gave him for that call last year to pit before the end of the Coca-Cola 600, it cost them the race. I think he can make it right this time around. Among all crew chiefs this season, his weighted position retention rate during green flag pit cycles on non-drafting tracks ranks first. And the decision-making under yellow has been somewhat on par with that. So for Alan Gustafson, I think redemption is in the cards, and Chase Elliott gets a Coke 600 win that eluded him last year.
Nice. I also picked a Hendrick car and not Kyle Larson, despite us telling you how good he is. I'm going Willie B. William Byron. Larson, of course, a good pick, but that's easy pick. Byron has plenty of speed, just like Kyle Larson does at these 550 tracks. We know he's been running toward the front. It was only the rain that stopped his top 10 streak last week at Circuit of the Americas. He finished 11th. So stats do make this something of a long shot, but I like the idea. David, we started this off talking about Jeff Gordon, 24 car, Ray Evernham, starting this, hello world sort of legacy. I like the idea of this driver crew chief combo saying, "What's up, world?" on one of the biggest nights of the year. So I'm just going with William Byron. I don't think it's crazy to pick a Hendrick car, so I'm just picking the 24 again.
I don't think it's crazy at all. As a matter of fact, I will predict that he wins the poll because we are qualifying this weekend.
Yes, we're qualifying.
He has a knack for that. It feels like a good, but he's going to be at the front at some point in this race, fair to say.
Good stuff. All right, now we go to our contrarian performers. David, I'll tee you up here. Who is someone to look at, possibly maybe to just outperform themselves or even maybe contend for a win? What do you think?
I'm pot committed on pit strategy this week, and I will take the driver whose crew chief ranks second to Alan Gustafson in the metric I mentioned earlier. That is Ross Chastain with crew chief Phil Surgeon. Phil Surgeon just getting it done in terms of green flag pit cycles. The strategy has been on point as much as the Chevrolet camp has done all season. Chastain, in his own right, tied for second in surplus passing value this season on 550 tracks.
All right. And I'm going way out there, David, only because we've seen strange stuff in the Coca-Cola 600. We've seen first-time winners. We've seen strategy calls. We've seen just the unexpected. Daniel Suarez, why not? We've seen crazy. We've seen weird. We've seen not crazy pick calls, but just strategic pick calls. And we know if you listen to this podcast, Travis Mack is someone we always bring up to do something slightly different. A long fuel run, a tire call. This is the type of race where these things seem to play out because you do have that extra 100 miles. David, I'm just saying Daniel Suarez, maybe for a surprise victory. Why not?
Keep Charlotte weird. And Travis Mack is the guy to do it. Great call.
Yes. All right. Why not? 99. Well, maybe something will happen. All right. Good episode, David. We dove deep into a lot of things. Don't forget, we are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Luminary, TuneIn, and YouTube. We're available no matter your device. Our entire back catalog of episodes is available for free at pauseregpod.com. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a rating or a review. That stuff helps spread the word of this podcast. We, of course, notice it is so appreciated, the stuff you guys write on there. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. Reach out on Twitter at pauseregpod, POSREGPOD. David, you're always working hard. What do you got this week?
Between NBC Sports and Forbes, I will have 4 new articles between now and Memorial Day. So
nice.
The best option for our listeners, I'll say, is to follow me on Twitter at DavidSmithMA, because you will see whenever I tweet a link to one of these articles, or just shoot me a note at motorsportsanalytics@gmail.com to sign up for email delivery of all my analysis. You'll have that right in your inbox.
Good stuff there. And same with me. Follow me on Twitter at Alan Cavanna because, got myself into a bunch of different things. So after you listen to this podcast, hopefully on Thursday morning, check out my Twitter account in Speed Sport. You will see our latest Quick Hits edition video that I do for them because it is a huge weekend of racing beyond NASCAR. Obviously, the Indy 500 I preview on there. The Little 500, if you haven't heard of that, make sure you check out what that is on the video. We just previewed the upcoming weekend of what will just be an awesome weekend of racing. So check that out. Check out NASCAR.com before you set your lineup on Sunday, the Fantasy Live game. Myself and Amy Long will be back in studio bringing you the best picks and strategies for your fantasy team. And yeah, everything else that goes along with the weekend. I'll be at the track, David. I hope to see you there, of course. So I'll be maybe tweeting some updates, some pictures from the garage now that we are allowed to go back in. It's very cool to be back and feel, entrenched in the sport once again. So I look forward to seeing you there, David. So another good episode, Positive Regression, episode 104. For David Smith, I'm Alan Cavanna. We will see you next week.